there is a shadow on the sun. A crimson blade gleams in the dust of forgotten wars. And behind it, a name spoken only in whispers across the empire that once called him savior, Ashova. You click because you've heard the name before. Farsight, the rebel, the heretic, the ghost. But this isn't a story about treason. It's a story about clarity. What happens when a soldier sees too clearly? About a boy born in fire, raised on promises, and broken on the anvil of truth. Ashova was never meant to rebel. He was made to lead. He was born under the blood-red skies of Virlaw, one of the most militarized septs in the Tau Empire, a forge world of war doctrine and fire caste honor. A place where the only lullaby is the crack of pulse fire on stone. Among the castes of the Tau, earth for builders, air for messengers, water for diplomats, and ethereal for rulers. His fate was carved at birth. Fire caste, Shas. From the moment he could walk, he was placed in training arenas where the walls breathed with the heat of plasma burns. His hands knew the grip of a pulse rifle before they understood a mother's touch. And in that crucible, a pattern emerged. Ashova was not just another warrior molded by doctrine. He was something else, something the Ethereals watched closely. He could read the battlefield like a language. Where others saw chaos, he saw rhythm, patterns, weakness, flow. They tested him against older cadets. He humiliated them. They tested him in impossible scenarios. He broke them. At 12, he designed a simulated defense grid that outwitted half the fire caste senior instructors. They began to whisper, "He sees like a god of war," one said. But gods are not born alone. There was another name that often drifted in his shadow, Shasla Taushavastos, later known as Commander Shadow's son. She, too, trained under the same legendary figure who would shape a generation of Tau commanders. The ancient tactician known only as Puretide, a master whose mind was fractured into data ghosts after his death, but while alive, burned with strategic brilliance. Under Puretide's eye, Ashova was tempered like the dawn blade he would one day find, sharpened to a terrifying edge. Shadowsun was cold precision. Ashova was fire and momentum. He believed in the greater good, yes, but not like the Ethereals preached it. His belief was visceral, his duty a sacrament of blood. Kais, the famed warrior of the Monka philosophy, was also a point of comparison. Kais fought with individual flair, but Ashova, he led, not from above, but within the phalanx, where the screams of the dying could still reach him. He did not seek personal glory, and yet it stalked him like a loyal hound. The caste system told him who he was supposed to be, a warrior that obeys, a blade in the Ethereal's hand. But even then, the cracks were forming. Quiet thoughts, private questions. Why do the Ethereals never fight? Why do they command such loyalty, without ever needing to prove it? He buried the questions. For now, the fire caste needed a hero, and Ashova would answer. But not yet the way they expected. His early campaigns were textbook perfection. Surgical strikes, defensive stands turned to traps, entire Gula outposts folded in days. His name spread through the ranks like wildfire. His victories weren't just efficient, they were poetic, the kind that made young Shasla whisper about destiny. But destiny, in the grim dark of the 41st millennium, is rarely a gift. It is a burden, a curse, a light that burns until it blinds. And somewhere, far away, the dawn blade waited, buried in Zeno's stone, pulsing with secrets not meant for Tau hands, waiting for the one commander who would step beyond the veil of obedience and never look back. But we are not there yet. At this point, Ashova still marched to the beat of the Empire's drum, still saluted when the Ethereals entered the room, still believed that the greater good was a path paved by unity, by submission, by perfect order. But his eyes, they already burned with the kind of clarity that terrifies gods. And the Empire, for all its harmony, fears nothing more than a soldier who begins to think. So remember this moment. Before the Dawnblade, before the orcs, before the silence. This is the last time Farsight would ever be just a hero. Next comes the making of a legend. And legends always bleed. They called him the firebrand of Viola. But to the Ethereals, he was something more, a weapon with a soul. Dangerous, loyal, burning too brightly for comfort. Ashova didn't rise through the ranks. He carved his way up with blade, brilliance, and belief. From the moment his boots first touched foreign soil, the stars began to whisper his name. He was the commander who never blinked, the fire caste's golden sun. And as the tides of war surged across the Damocles Gulf, it was Farsight who stood at the helm of the Empire's fury. The Damocles Crusade was not just another war. It was the Empire's reckoning with the Imperium of man, a race as vast as the void and as cruel as entropy itself. For the Tau, it was a war of proof, a trial by fire. Could their doctrine, their harmony, their greater good stand against a species that worshipped death and deified war? The answer would be written in blood, and Ashova was chosen to hold the pen. When he stepped onto the battlefield during the Crusade, it was not as a pawn, but as a prodigy. He led hunter cadres with an unshakable calm, adapting his strategies in real time, countering Imperial forces who fought like ancient beasts, with faith and steel. The humans, so chaotic, so primitive, so alien, fascinated him, not in admiration, in recognition. Here were soldiers who fought not for unity, but for survival, who charged in a plasma fire with nothing but fury and prayers. The Gula did not fear death, they revered it. And in this madness, Ashova found his first fracture of doubt. What kind of species would choose to die so pointlessly? And what kind of truth did they believe in that made such madness possible? He didn't voice these thoughts, not then. The Empire needed victories, and so he gave them, again and again. He developed tactics that would become the bones of Tau military doctrine: integrated fire zones, mobile skirmish units, drone phase suppression. He saw the battlefield as a living thing, and he danced with it like no commander before or since. He was not just a strategist. He was a storm given form. Where he marched, resistance crumbled, cities fell, Imperial regiments broke like sand before the tide. In the early years, he still believed in the Ethereals, still saw them as the architects of destiny. They praised him, rewarded him, whispered in council chambers that Ashova would be the future of the fire caste, a name that would teach the stars the meaning of unity. But behind their soft words, they feared him, because Ashova didn't ask permission. He didn't wait for doctrine. He rewrote it. His enemies could not predict him, and neither could his masters. He won battles no one expected to be winnable. His soldiers followed him not just because they were trained to, but because they believed in him. That kind of loyalty is dangerous. The Damocles Crusade began as a promise, a great expansion into the northern fringe of the Segmentum Ultima. But it ended in a bitter draw when the full might of the Imperium awoke. Adeptus Astartes arrived, space marines, demigods of death, and Ashova met them not with awe, but calculation. He saw what others could not, that this was not a war the Tau could win. Not yet, not with faith, not with ideals, only with time and tactics. He advocated retreat, strategic withdrawal. It saved thousands, but it cost him something. The Empire doesn't reward realism. It rewards obedience. And so, while Shadow Sun was put in stasis, preserved for the future, Ashova was sent to the fringes, to fight orcs in forgotten systems. A test, they said, a challenge worthy of his skill. But to him, it felt like exile. Still, he obeyed. He always obeyed. He did not yet know that the orcs of Arunisha would change everything, that the screams of his dying comrades would echo forever in the hollow places of his mind, that in a field of corpses, beneath an alien sky, he would find a blade that whispered truths older than the Tau Empire itself. But that is the next chapter. Here, in the echo of the Damocles Crusade, we see the final version of Ashova as the Empire wanted him. A champion, a loyalist, a weapon sheathed in ceremony. He stood beneath banners of unity, even as his eyes searched the stars for something more. He had led, he had won, he had bled, and yet, he was not celebrated like a savior. He was watched. There is a saying among the Tau: the brightest flame burns the shortest. But Ashova would defy that too. He would not burn out. He would become something else, the kind of fire that never dies. There is a silence that comes after too much victory, a stillness before the soul begins to rot. On Arunisha, the war never stopped screaming, and neither did he. The Ethereals called it campaign, a theater of war, a necessary cleansing. But Arunisha was none of those things. It was a slaughterhouse, a graveyard of dreams, a place where the screams of the fire caste still echo through the dust-choked valleys. And in the center of that crimson storm stood Ashova, watching the greater good bleed out beneath him. He had arrived expecting war. Instead, he found extinction. The orcs were not raiders or savages. They were a tidal wave of muscle and madness, building megalithic war engines from scrap and instinct. Their logic was blood, their diplomacy, steel, their hunger for violence, endless. Ashova had seen many foes: Gula fanatics, road traders, chaos cults. But the orcs laughed when they died. They wanted the battle, and there were so many. Each day was a new onslaught. Each night, another wall of the command bastion fell to rock bombardment or clawed assault. Farsight's hunter cadres fought like gods, but even gods drown eventually. And when the tides of green smashed into the final bastion, when it seemed that the fire caste would be extinguished, he led them in person. No command from orbit, no reliance on drones, just blood, dust, and blade. The Dawn Blade. He found it buried beneath the ruins of an alien temple, a tomb of black glass, ancient and humming with cold power. No Tau historians had records of its makers. No Earth caste engineer could explain its function. But when Ashova gripped its hilt, it sang in his mind. It was not a song of joy. It was a dirge. The blade cut through orcs like starlight through fog. Weightless, effortless, eternal. The tides broke. The war boss fell. And for a moment, Arunisha was quiet. But something had shifted. Something irreversible. Ashova no longer needed the pulse rifle. No longer called for reinforcements. He stood at the edge of that victory, soaked in alien blood, and felt nothing. No triumph. No glory. Only absence. Because Brightsword had died. His oldest comrade, slain by orcs while saving a wounded Shasui. His blood still steamed on the ruins as the last greenskins fell. And though Farsight claimed the field, he could not claim peace. More died that day. Plasma Knife, Flame Wither, so many names lost to war. Names that had once laughed with him in the barracks. Names now whispered in ghost-lit memory halls. Ashova began to feel it then. The sickness, not of the body, but of the lie. Were the Ethereals? Were their guiding lights? Their counsel? Their reinforcements? Had the greater good forgotten its champions? They had sent him here to die, not to win. And now that he had won, the silence was louder than ever. He began to question things he once took as doctrine. The teachings of the Ethereals, the rigidity of the castes, the blind obedience bred into every Tau since birth. And the Dawn Blade pulsed in his hand like a heartbeat that did not belong to him. He kept it. Of course he did. He told the Earth caste it was a trophy, a symbol of defiance. But privately, he wondered, was this blade meant for me? Or did I mean to become what the blade wanted? The answers did not come. Only more war. More campaigns on the Empire's frontier. More skirmishes against pirates, cults, rogue Ork War bands. And always, always, more silence from the Ethereals. They called it trust. He began to call it abandonment. His soldiers, too, began to see the cracks. They still fought under the banner of the greater good, but they followed him, not the ethereal mandates relayed from distant stars. And why wouldn't they? He had saved them. He had bled with them. He had buried their brothers. He didn't stand in a floating skimmer, miles above the battlefield. He walked the fire with them. He whispered the names of the dead before each mission. He stared into the eyes of every Shasla and asked, not ordered, "Are you ready?" No Ethereal had ever done that. And so, the seed of rebellion was planted, not in treason, but in grief. Arunisha was meant to be the breaking of the orcs. Instead, it was the beginning of a Shova-esque break with everything he had ever known. The blade had changed him. The deaths had hollowed him. And the silence had taught him the final lesson. That loyalty, without understanding, is just obedience wearing a pretty name. He had obeyed his whole life. Now he would understand. And when he did, the Tau Empire would tremble. Because what happens when the greatest weapon the Ethereals ever forged decides to turn the blade around? We're about to find out. Some betrayals are not forged in hatred. They are born from silence, from 1,000 unanswered questions, from the moment you realize the gods you swore to serve have no voice, only control. After Arunisha, the fire caste began to whisper his name not with awe, but with reverence. Not Commander Ashova, Shaso Vila Shavakaismatyer. The name spread like a flame across the frontier. A title so long, it sounded like a myth. Farsight, the warrior who sees beyond the horizon, beyond obedience, beyond lies. But it didn't begin as rebellion. It began as mourning. Farsight returned from Arunisha changed. Not just older, worn. His eyes carried the weight of too many funerals, and behind them, something colder, calculation. He buried Brightsword and the others in stasis tombs, sealed with personal rites. He kept their names alive in mission logs, tactical simulations, memorial drills. But the Ethereals didn't send replacements. They didn't send aid. They sent silence. And when they finally spoke, it was not with gratitude, it was correction. Reports filed improperly, questions about his command structure, inquiries into his unauthorized tactical modifications, even veiled suggestions that his loyalty needed reaffirmation. Farsight didn't argue. He acted. He cut communications. One by one, he severed the links to high command. No declarations, no speeches, just a sudden and absolute void. The Tau Empire woke up one cycle to find its most celebrated commander on. It was not a civil war. It was not a mutiny. It was a ghosting. A slow, surgical excision of everything the Ethereals tried to imprint upon him. He disappeared beyond the borders of the Empire, deep into the unclaimed stars near the Purdue's Rift, with a loyal contingent of Fire Caste veterans, Earth Caste scientists, and Air Caste pilots who trusted him more than they trusted ancient dogma. There, in the cold light of a hostile galaxy, the Farsight Enclaves were born. They were not an empire. They were a wound, a red mark carved into the map, like a scar the Tau refused to name. At first, the Empire claimed it was a miscommunication, a rogue mission, a quarantine. But as cycles passed, it became clear this was rejection. Farsight did not abandon the greater good. He redefined it. In his eyes, the Ethereals had become what they once warned against, blind shepherds leading flocks into slaughter. Their absolute control, their unexplained authority, it no longer inspired him. It repelled him. His rebellion was not about conquest or glory. It was about truth. The truth that the Ethereals had no divine right to rule. The truth that the caste could think for themselves. The truth that unity, when enforced by dogma, is just a prettier kind of tyranny. And most damning of all, the truth that their so-called harmony was maintained not by faith, but pheromones. The Earth Caste scientists in the Enclaves uncovered it. The Ethereals released subtle biochemical signals that triggered obedience, trust, even reverence in the other castes. It wasn't divine guidance. It was chemical control. Farsight didn't broadcast this revelation. He didn't need to. He simply removed the Ethereals from his society. Quietly. Entirely. And the people followed. No riots. No breakdowns. No chaos. The Enclaves continued. They grew. They thrived. Without Ethereals, that single act was more damning than any battlefield betrayal. Because it proved something terrifying. The Tau didn't need them. The Empire, of course, declared the Enclaves heretical, forbidden, off-limits, but they didn't attack. Why? Because deep down, the Ethereals feared that if word of the Enclaves spread, others might follow. The Enclaves became a paradox, an ideological rupture, a living proof that belief, when unshackled from control, does not die, it evolves. And still, Farsight said little. No manifestos, no propaganda, just a single message, broadcast once across the void. The greater good endures, but we will not endure it at the cost of our souls. It was not rebellion, it was revelation. And for the first time in Tau history, a commander chose the battlefield of ideas over that of orders. Farsight turned his back on the Empire not to destroy it, but to redeem it, even if that meant becoming the monster in their stories, the ghost in their doctrine, the heretic they would warn their children about. And yet, for those who followed him into the dark, he was not a traitor. He was the only one who still saw the stars clearly. Every commander has a shadow. Farsight had 8. Warriors forged in fire, bound by blood, and loyal beyond death. Not to an empire, not to an ethereal, but to each other. They called them the 8, not out of ceremony or tradition, but because there were only 8 names he could trust when the stars began to fall apart. Ashova, the rebel, the exile, the visionary. He was never alone. When he broke with the Empire, it was not a solitary walk into the void. Others followed, and not because they believed in rebellion, but because they believed in him. The 8 were more than advisors, more than heroes. They were memory, identity, proof that the Enclaves were not built on ideology alone, but on brotherhood, sacrifice, and loss. They were a pantheon of mortals, each name now carved into Enclave myth with the reverence of saints. Let me tell you about them. Commander Bravestorm. His real name is lost to time, but his deeds remain, seared into the minds of every fire caste cadet who studies tactical bravery. A veteran of the Arunisha campaign, Bravestorm stood beside Farsight when the walls collapsed. He held the central corridor for 6 hours against a charging Ork horde after his battlesuit was breached and his arm severed. Did he retreat? No. He linked into his 15/8 nerve cord directly and kept firing until the floor beneath him turned to slag. They rebuilt his body with cybernetics, but they never repaired the haunted look in his eyes. He speaks little now, but when Bravestorm speaks, even commanders listen. Commander Brightsword, the first, the closest, the fallen. Brightsword was not just a name. He was Farsight's mirror, bold, strategic, merciless in his execution. Where Ashova hesitated, Brightsword struck. His death during the final stages of the Arunisha campaign marked the beginning of the end for Farsight's faith in the Empire. Farsight speaks of him rarely, but always in reverence. Some say his name still echoes in Farsight's private comms, ghost signals transmitted into the void. Ovisa, a genius of the Earth caste. Ovisa was a savant of gravimetric engineering and forbidden technologies. He designed the gravity wells that protect the Enclave core worlds and retrofitted Farsight's own suit with the adaptive plating that has saved the commander more than once. Rumors abound that Ovisa communes with pre-Age of Strife relics, that he has begun unlocking the ancient Xenos tech buried within the Dawn Blade's molecular structure. He does not speak to outsiders. He is obsessed, but in his silence, brilliance unfolds. Oblatai 9-0, the silent juggernaut, an AI-driven broadside battlesuit, unlike anything else in the known Tau arsenal. Rumored to be a self-aware weapon, Oblotai is a walking engine of annihilation. During the defense of Vigo's Junction, he eliminated an entire Ork armor column single-handedly when the rest of the Enclave forces were pinned. Some say he is not Tau at all, that he is a machine soul given purpose by Farsight. But within the Enclaves, he is revered, not feared. Shaso Archon, known as Ghostblade, a stealth specialist with a kill record rivaling entire squads. Where Brave Storm brought fire and fury, Archon was the unseen hand. He led covert missions behind chaos lines, targeted assassination strikes, sabotage raids. It is said he once infiltrated an Imperial command ship and disabled its core reactor with nothing but a phase knife and a neural override spike. He died in silence as he lived. Farsight keeps his helmet, scratched and scorched, above his personal shrine. Torchstar, once a promising commander under Shadowsun's command, Torchstar defected to the Enclaves after uncovering a secret about Ethereal influence that broke her faith. She brought with her advanced prototype flammers and plasma systems, introducing them to the Enclave's arsenal. Torchstar was outspoken, volatile, passionate. She clashed with Ovisa constantly, science versus flame. Yet in the field, there was none more fierce. She died during a boarding action against Genestealer-infested wreckage. The fires of her battlesuits still burn in the memory of every flame cadre. Shaso Aradon. Few know his name, but those who do remember the scream. During the Harrowvale incursion, Aradon's cadre was overwhelmed by Tyranid bioforms. He overloaded his reactor core and detonated in the heart of the swarm, buying just enough time for civilian evacuation. Only the upper half of his battlesuit was ever recovered. Farsight ordered it placed at the gates of the Enclave's central fortress, a broken sentinel, eternally watching. And then the eighth. Farsight himself, not by pride, but because no one else would carry the burden. He never asked to be followed. He never demanded loyalty, but they gave it to him, all of it, not because he was flawless, but because he was true. Each of the eight filled a part of him he had lost. Brightsword, the fire; Brave Storm, the endurance; Ovisa, the mind; Torchstar, the fury; Ghostblade, the shadow; Oblotai, the indomitable; Aradon, the sacrifice; and Farsight, the sorrow. Together, they were more than a council. They were memory turned into motion. Each death cut deeper than the last. Every loss shaved pieces from his soul. With every coffin, he became quieter, harder, until all that remained was a voice like iron and a gaze like ash. They say he still speaks to them, not out loud, but when he stands alone before the stars, he asks questions, tactical decisions, strategic puzzles, as if their spirits are still by his side, as if the eight have become something more than living Tau. Perhaps they are. In the Farsight Enclaves, statues of the eight stand at every military academy. Their philosophies are studied like Holy Writ. Their maneuvers are practiced by cadets too young to understand the price of such legacy. The eight have become icons, not of victory, but of loss turned to purpose. That is their true gift, not their strength, their devotion. They followed Farsight not because they believed he was right, but because when everything fell apart, he was the only one who stayed. When the Ethereals vanished, when the Empire turned away, when the stars grew cold, he stayed. And now, though many of them lie dead, their shadows march with him still. In every battle, in every breath, in every strike of the Dawnblade, Farsight is never alone. Because loyalty, when earned, not programmed, becomes something death cannot touch. It becomes legend. Not all weapons are meant to be held. Some are meant to bind. Some do not obey, they choose. And when they choose, they never let go. He found it in a tomb, buried beneath a dead world choked in ash. Long before he was a rebel, long before he stopped believing in Ethereals, or castes, or empire, back when all he wanted was to save his brothers from orcs. The Dawnblade. The name is almost poetic, almost gentle. It lies. The truth is carved in the way it hums in his palm, the way it slides through armor, flesh, and matter itself with no resistance, like the universe itself wants it to kill. It is older than the Tau, older than the stars they call home. No one built it. It was awakened, forged, perhaps, by hands that no longer exist. Or worse, by minds that still do. Farsight did not know what he held when he first swung it, only that it worked, that it turned an unwinnable war into a final stand, that when he raised it, the orcs fled. But even as the blade sang, it whispered, not in words. In time, the blade is cursed. That much is known, but not in the way legends often lie. This curse is not fire or rot or madness. It is eternity. The Dawn Blade feeds on temporal essence, steals from those it strikes. It drinks the life force of its victims, and in doing so, it preserves its wielder. Farsight no longer ages, at least, not like the rest of his kind. Centuries have passed, and yet his face remains locked in the scarred youth of the Arunisha campaign. The fire caste lives fast, dies young. Farsight should have turned to dust before most of the Imperium knew his name. But he endures, at a cost. Every battle he fights is a theft. Every death at his blade another heartbeat absorbed into his unending march. He has become a siphon, a temporal singularity wrapped in red armor and regret. He is immortal, and he hates it, because with every year that passes, the Enclaves change. Old friends fade. The Eight, his heart, vanish one by one. Cadres are led by warriors who never knew Brightsword's laugh, or Torchstar's fury, or Bravestorm's silence. They salute him like a god. He does not want to be one, but he cannot die. He tried once, more than once, but the blade does not let go. Whether by technology or sorcery, the Dawnblade is bound to him. No other can wield it. No other can even touch it without triggering a violent, energetic reaction, enough to atomize an armored fire warrior in seconds. It is his alone, his gift, his prison. Many whisper that the blade is Necron in origin, a hyperphase weapon, tuned beyond comprehension. Some suggest it's a shard of tan matter, living divinity forced into solid form. Others believe it is a relic of a long-dead alien empire that once ruled time itself. Farsight does not ask. He knows it's cursed, because it keeps him in the war, long after he should have slept, long after the stars he fought for have turned cold. He has watched the Empire change from afar, watched Shadow Sun rise from stasis and lead a new generation, watched the Ethereals double down on control, watched the fire caste shift from faith to fanaticism, and all the while, he remains unchanged, a relic among relics. Every swing of the blade is a step further from peace, but still he wields it, because he must, because someone has to remember. The Dawnblade is not just a weapon, it is penance. Every time he activates its energy field, he sees the past, feels the heat of Arunisha, hears Brightsword scream, watches his brothers fall again and again. Time folds around the blade like an old wound reopened. It is not just an extension of his will. It is a reminder that power without sacrifice is slavery, that immortality without love is torture, that freedom, bought with blood, must be paid for forever. And so he keeps it close, not because he wants to, but because he has no choice. The blade chose him the moment he needed it most, and now it owns him. Some in the Enclaves have begun to whisper of his condition, quietly, respectfully, the Commander Eternal, the Blade Father. They do not understand the weight he carries. How could they? They have not watched empires rise and fall from the same vantage point for centuries. They do not hear the silence between seconds, the hollow echo of time itself folding to accommodate his curse. He smiles sometimes, just enough to comfort them. But inside, he knows the truth. He will never know rest. He will never rejoin the stars. Not until the blade is buried in something older than war itself, or until he finds the one thing stronger than death. Meaning, the Dawn Blade was never just a weapon. It is the symbol of a question the Tau Empire cannot ask. What if obedience is not enough? What if sacrifice must continue, even after there is nothing left to protect? What if the war never ends, and he never stops fighting? For as long as he lives, so does the question, and so does the blade. A red streak across the galaxy, a ghost in the storm, a commander who cannot die, because some truths are too dangerous to be buried. He did not betray the greater good. He betrayed those who corrupted it. He did not abandon unity. He sought to purify it. In a galaxy drowning in lies, a Chauvet's greatest crime was to ask why. There are those who call him heretic, others, savior. Some whisper traitor with venom on their tongues. Others carve his name into the walls of training halls and speak it like prayer. But what is Farsight really? A madman wielding alien power? A visionary seeing through a veil the rest refuse to lift? A monster doomed to eternal war? Or something worse? Something true. A Chauvet's philosophy was never about destruction. It was about clarity. He didn't turn his back on the Tau Empire because he wanted power, or because he thirsted for conquest. If that were true, he would have marched back into the Empire with fleets blazing, torn apart septs, planted his banner on the bones of Ethereals. But he didn't. He went quiet, built a refuge, a new kind of truth, because in the depths of his soul, Farsight still believes in the greater good, but not the one whispered by golden-robed manipulators behind shimmering curtains of ceremony and chemical control. His vision is harder, sharper, painfully earned, where the Ethereals preach that all Tau must obey for the harmony of the whole. Farsight says, no, obedience without question is not harmony. It is slavery, where they teach that the caste must stay within their roles for the greater good to survive. Farsight says, then it deserves to die. He has seen too much to believe in the dogma anymore. He has held dying soldiers in his arms, Earth caste volunteers who picked up rifles when the lines broke. He has watched water caste diplomats die with sidearms in their hands, protecting wounded children. He has bled beside them, and in their screams, he heard the lie. The caste system is a cage. The Ethereals are its keepers, and the greater good is not a gift. It is a burden, one each soul must choose to carry, not because of programming, but because they believe in each other. This is Farsight's heresy, the idea that individual will matters, not for ego, not for chaos, but for truth. Because what is the greater good, if not a dream? And if it must be enforced, controlled, bred in every thought, then is it really good at all? To the Tau Empire, this is dangerous thinking. But Farsight is not alone. He is not the only rebel in the dark. He stands beside a pantheon of the disillusioned. Cypher, the silent angel of the dark angels, wandering with the Emperor's own blade, yet never striking. A man who betrays for a purpose no one understands. Abaddon, once the war master of chaos, who turned on his false gods and now walks the edge between damnation and renewal, bringing ruin not for vengeance, but to break a broken system. Even Robot Gilliman, pre-march of the Ultramarines, now resurrected and staring in horror at the Imperium he once tried to perfect. A lawful architect of a lawless empire. Farsight belongs among them, not because he is like them, but because he is not. He is Tau. He does not worship gods. He does not hear the voices of the warp, but he knows that even without gods, a society can become a cult. Knows that even without the warp, a people can still be lost. He doesn't want to destroy the Tau Empire. He wants it to awaken. He wants it to remember why the greater good mattered in the first place. It was never supposed to be about dominance. It was supposed to be about hope, unity in diversity, peace through shared will, strength in common purpose. But the Ethereals corrupted it. They turned it into obedience, They silenced dissent, and they lied. Farsight carries the weight of that realization like a coffin he cannot bury. He leads the Enclaves not with a crown, but with a shadow, not as a god, as a warning. Free will is not chaos. It is the responsibility of the soul. And so, in his teachings, few as they are, often passed down through example rather than command, there is a single through line. Think, choose, fight for what you believe, not what you are told, because he remembers what it felt like to believe everything he was taught. He remembers kneeling before Ethereals as a young cadet, feeling awe, feeling faith. And he remembers how that faith died, quietly, not with a gunshot, not with betrayal, but with the silence of the void, when he called for help, and they never came. The question he poses to the Tau Empire is not an act of war. It is a mirror, and the Ethereals cannot look into it, because if they do, they'll see the truth. That one warrior, bleeding, haunted, and cursed, is more loyal to the spirit of the greater good than they have ever been. Farsight is not a madman. He is not a prophet. He is the galaxy's most justified rebel, because he doesn't want a throne. He wants a future, one where no soldier is sacrificed to preserve the illusion of harmony, one where no child is born into a lie, one where belief is earned, not engineered. That is why the blade still sings for him, why his warriors follow him into hell, why his enclaves do not crumble, because a truth that hurts, but is real, will always outlast a comfort that is false. In the cold dark of the void, where empires die and gods forget their names, Ashova still believes, and that might be the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Even legends cast shadows, and in the twilight of his long war, Farsight no longer walks in the footsteps of ghosts. He is becoming one. In the silence, after centuries of rebellion, something stirs, not from the Empire, not from the Enclaves, from beyond, the Tyranids, a hunger not born of belief or empire, but instinct, a biological genocide sweeping across the stars, stripping everything to bone and dust. Farsight had seen many foes, but this was no war of doctrine, no ideological clash. The hive mind doesn't negotiate, doesn't believe. It consumes, and it came for the Enclaves. Farsight, the blade of truth, a recent entry into the chronicle of this eternal commander, plunges us into this crucible of desperation. The novel is more than a military campaign. It is an X-ray of a soul under siege. We find Ashova facing extinction, not just of his people, but of his purpose. The Tyranids devour identity, purpose, legacy. They are oblivion incarnate, and against them, even Farsight's defiance begins to feel like a candle in a storm. The novel casts him not as a glorious hero, but as something closer to a ghost, a commander walking among the living, but never truly with them. His immortality is now obvious. Warriors who once fought beside him are dust, even their statues, worn smooth by time. He is surrounded by new generations, pilots, engineers, commanders, who revere him, but do not know him. And how could they? He still wears the same armor, still wields the same blade, still carries the same grief. He hasn't changed. The galaxy has. And so, when the Tyranids descend, when the stars scream and the ground is torn open by biological monstrosities, the Enclaves look to him like a myth made flesh. He gives them more. The campaign is brutal, not cinematic, not glorious. It's survival. Farsight leads from the front, not because he is arrogant, but because he must. His mind, sharpened by centuries of battle, becomes the last wall between civilization and consumption. In one engagement, he deploys decoy colonies to bait hive splinters away from populated worlds, sacrifices by choice, not command. In another, he personally enters a Tyranid bio-vessel through a fusion breach, severing its synapse node with the Dawn Blade. alone. He emerges soaked in alien ichor, too injured to speak, but still standing. It is not victory, it is endurance. But the real battle is internal, because Farsight begins to realize that even if he wins, he cannot stay. His presence has become unnatural, a statue walking among rivers. Time itself now recoils from him. Every soldier who kneels before him reminds him of someone dead. Every battlefield echoes with voices he cannot silence. He cannot laugh. He cannot rest. Worse, he cannot change. There are moments in Blade of Truth where he stands outside command briefings, silent, watching younger commanders argue, debate, lead. He does not interrupt. He is not jealous. He is tired. He built a society to be free, and now that it is, he's no longer sure he belongs in it. But destiny is cruel, and just as he considers leaving, disappearing into the void forever, fate places another weight in his hand. A new threat, a greater war, a decision. The novel ends not with triumph, but with questions. Farsight stands before a dying star, gazing into the void. Alone. Again, he speaks only one sentence. Perhaps I was never meant to be understood. It is not despair. It is clarity. Because Farsight's life was never about being followed. It was about protecting the choice to follow, or not, to obey, or not, to live free, or not live at all. And the cost of that freedom is him. His legacy now becomes larger than rebellion, larger than doctrine. He is the blade that cannot rest. And even as his hands tremble, even as the universe forgets his name, he still chooses the greater good. His greater good, built not on obedience, but truth. A truth that bleeds, that ages, that hurts, that endures. And so the blade remains in his grip, not because it is light, but because there is no one else left who can carry it. The wars will continue. The hive will return. The empire will tighten its chains. But as long as the enclaves still stand, so does he. Ashova, Farsight, the rebel who never stopped believing, and the ghost who just might outlive the stars. They said it wouldn't last. A colony without its priests. A society without chains. But decades passed, then centuries, and the enclaves remained. Not by miracle, by will. What Farsight built was never meant to survive. Not by imperial reckoning. Not by Tau doctrine. It was supposed to collapse under its own defiance. A failed experiment. A cautionary tale whispered in fire-cast barracks. But the enclaves endure, because they are not held together by fear. They are held together by choice. Today, the Farsight enclaves stand as one of the most strategically self-sufficient powers on the edge of the Tau Empire. They control a constellation of heavily fortified worlds, each one a bastion of pragmatism and innovation. From the Warforged citadel of Virlos Resurgence to the deep-buried vaults of the Arsher Laborium, the enclaves operate with a discipline born not from doctrine, but from sheer belief. Their soldiers fight harder because they choose to. Their engineers invent faster because they are free to think. And their leaders are not crowned by caste or command. They rise because others believe they should. There are no Ethereals here, and the sky does not fall. The fire caste still forms the martial backbone. Their battle suits are sleeker, more aggressive, customized with blood-red plating and iconography that reflects individual deeds, not sept allegiance. Entire cadres are trained to operate without centralized command, built on trust, synergy, adaptability. They call it the Way of the Eight, not a religion, but a remembrance. Each young warrior knows the stories: Bravestorm's last stand, Torchstar's fury, Oblotai's silence, Ovisu's mind. These are not myths. They are standards. And meeting those standards is how one earns respect, not obedience. The Earth caste has flourished without ethereal oversight. Their tech has diverged in strange, incredible ways, integrating scavenged Xenos architecture, developing autonomous AI systems that would be heresy within the Empire. power grids that shift with population needs, drone swarms that learn and evolve in real time, defensive arrays that reconfigure their own design mid-assault. They don't ask permission, they solve. And yet, for all this independence, the Enclaves have not fallen to chaos. That alone speaks volumes. They are isolated, under siege, tempted by ruin, like all who stand alone in the darkness. And yet, they do not waver, because their faith is not in gods, not in war, not in control. It is in each other. That, more than anything, is Farsight's legacy. He taught them to believe not in perfection, but in principle, to question, to endure, to choose unity, not be given it. Their tensions, yes. The mainline Tau Empire still considers the Enclaves a rogue element. Communications are scarce. Diplomats are turned away. Skirmishes flare at the borders. Small, brutal, unspoken. But open war? No. Perhaps the Ethereals fear what such a war might reveal. That the Enclaves function better without them. That their soldiers fight harder. That their people are happier. Or perhaps the Ethereals simply hope time will erode the memory of Farsight. But time cannot touch what he's built. His philosophies are etched into curriculum, simulated in war games, written into the hearts of a new generation who may never meet him, but feel him in everything. And though most in the galaxy think the Enclaves a footnote, those who fought them, those who've survived, they know better. The Enclaves do not falter, because they remember what the Empire has forgotten, that the greater good must be chosen, or it is nothing.